So I'm going to call the meeting to order. I'm going to share my screen. Screen. I'm going to start by, I sent you guys the agenda yesterday. But I will put it up on the screen right now. Can everybody see it?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Make it a little smaller. Gus, I know that I didn't hear back from you, but I figured you were going to be talking about CEPs. No?
Yes.
Okay.
I did respond last night to Janet, but it was late.
Okay, so I didn't, we could always have like a running agenda if you wanted to.
It's fine. I'm just going to talk about the DCP and CPs.
All right, so I'll just add that to this. I have to duplicate it. Hold on. I know you wanted me to add anything to your report, and we'll just leave it at that, but I could always add to it as we're going.
That's fine.
Okay. And then we have the minutes. So I'm going to start the meeting by asking us to approve them. I can make them a little bit bigger.
I move to accept the minutes as presented.
You read them already?
Uh-huh. I'm sorry. I'm supposed to wait for everyone else. I'm sorry.
You go, Charlene. All right, I'll just flash them up here. We already have a motion.
Yes, I totally get that the Russians lied in the past over a whole range of things.
Thanks for that news briefing.
Yeah, who's with the news briefing though? Who is that?
It's Lamar. I muted him. Sorry, Lamar. I mute you because I love you. Right, Christine?
All right, Louis, is Janet in the meeting? Did she answer when you pulled her in?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, so Charlene Dawson was a motion to approve, and we're just going to wait for a second.
I second.
Okay. I just wanted to, so Mary McDonald second, so moved. I just wanted to actually ask for your approval to bump the equity and access work to our September meeting. The reason being is because we wanted to spend a lot of the, all of the new information that has just been released around our opening with the projected date of September 10th. So that was going to take up a lot of our meeting. We wanted to make sure that all of your questions or concerns were raised and answered for our constituencies. So if there are no objections, we are still working on our vision and mission statement and building in some of our equity discussions and our beliefs around that work. But I would like to move it till September. So are there any objections?
No.
No objection on my part.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen because eventually, as our presenter, Dr. Mike will share his. So the first thing that I wanted to, is my screen stopped? Yeah. You guys don't see my screen anymore, right?
No.
So the first thing that I wanted to do with your approval is to present DLT meeting dates for 2020, 2021.
Okay, go.
All right. So, okay, the following dates, as you know, that our bylaws talk about having it the second Monday of every month. So our, the dates are as follows. And if anyone has any objections, let me know. September 14th, October 12th. Louis, can you do me a favor and put these in the chat?
Yeah, so what are these?
September 14th, and we'll send you a,
Isn't October 12th Columbus Day?
Checking now. Yes, it is.
Who made these?
Good Italian you are, Joe, recognizing Columbus Day.
oh, October
Cancel
12th is, okay.
Cancel
So,
it.
all right. So we'll go back and change that.
It's Indigenous Peoples Day. But anyway,
November 9th.
wait, can we just change that date, or you just want to go through the dates you
You
have
want-
and then go back?
Hold on, let me go through, let me get into a calendar, hold on.
Sorry.
Okay. So we could do October 19th, the Monday, or Tuesday, October 13th.
Tuesday, October 13th. That way we're still on the same schedule.
Is everyone in agreement with that?
In agreement?
Yes.
Any objections?
Charlene, you're so efficient and on point today.
Oh, no, she is a Robert's Rule queen. I
Oh,
take her lead.
I'm on my third cup of Bustelo. So,
Oh, no, I like it. I like when she keeps me in order. All right, so we are in agreement that October 13th, Tuesday, October 13th is the October DLT meeting. Okay, moving on, November 9th, December 14th, January 11th, February 8th, March 8th,
Then we're gonna have another pandemic come March, so cancel everything after that.
oh, please. The pandemic's coming in October.
All these meetings will be remote anyway.
It'll
Yeah,
be virtual
April-
anyway, Justine.
yeah, April
So we're
5th,
good.
I know, but
May 10th,
Oh, wait, I missed the April date. Sorry.
April
Yeah.
5th,
April 5th, you said?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Is that the first Monday in April, or that's,
Wait, hold on. Yeah, you're right. Let me just double check that. I might have.
Wait.
Hold on, that might be wrong.
Yeah, it's April 12th.
Yeah, April 12th.
April
So.
12th. Keep in mind, we don't have a calendar yet though, right?
Yeah,
That's
but
right,
I believe, Lamar, our vacation is the last week in March and the first week in April. I believe
Okay.
it's going by any other, like all the other schools that have released their calendars that are very similar to ours. It's been the last week in March through the first week in April. So yeah, so April 12th is the date.
But are you going to get a break this year that you don't have to work through unpaid? Just asking.
I don't know.
Okay, just putting it out there.
It's above our level. It's above our level of discussion, so we'll let you know.
Hey, let me give you the official. That's a great question. We'll circle back and get back to you.
Yeah, we'll hear that tomorrow night on that parent forum or whatever the heck they call it.
And
Whatever.
here's my answer. I will escalate that. Okay, so
That's a good one.
What about June?
so we did May 10th and June 14th.
Yes.
All right, so let me just review them. September 14th, October 13th, November 9th, December 14th, January 11th, February 8th, March 8th, April 12th, May 10th, and June 14th.
I'll put these on everyone's calendars today as well. Okay?
Thank you.
You got
thank
it.
you.
And it's in the chat.
Okay, let me just get my stuff together here. Okay. All right. So the next item on our agenda is talking about our DCP goals and review and planning for the 2020-2021 school year. So as you know, that what we have presented in June, we have not made any changes to our goals as of now. We are carefully monitoring the needs of our schools and the needs of our district based on some of the challenges and changes that are happening within this pandemic. We did some forward thinking and some predictions based on both our state ESSA data as well as the needs that our schools and students are going to have in regard to gaps in learning that have occurred over the past 6 months. And that is why our targeted goal around MTSS, which is a multi-level support structure for students, is one of our main goals that we are going to be focusing on this year. Secondly, we have been having some deep conversations with our schools around assessment tools and screeners, and how once we start come September projected date, one of the first key priorities of our schools will be assessing students aligned to the power standards and the standards that they have missed out on, to ensure that we have a clear understanding of where they are in this work. So at our meeting next month, that is going to be one of the key things we talk about, because we will be able to solidify how we are supporting our schools and what are their next steps in ensuring that we have a clear understanding of where our students are at and how we can tailor instruction to meet their needs. So that is where we are with our DCEP goals. I know when Gus comes on, he's going to give us an update about the DCEP template. As of right now, I have not heard of anything, but once that does come out, we will be working on that together. So now switching over to our school CEP goal. As Gus announced, we, Dr. Mike and I and the team from the borough, as well as Debbie White Debbie Winkler from my team, have gone over all of our schools' updates of their DCEP goals. Of their CEP goals, and we have put in for alignment and approval towards their budgets. However, we do know that come the opening of school, our SLTs are going to have to get together and really review once again their data and the needs of their school based on where they are in September, and make any adjustments. And as a DLT, we will revisit that together and focus on how the needs of our schools are going to be reflected in our DCEP goals. I do once again encourage all of you to reach out to your SLTs. As you know, they have been meeting this summer. I sent you the list, and some of you did reach out and have been sitting in on some SLT meetings. Thank you, Laura. The SLTs that you sat in on really did appreciate your willingness and your guidance. So I do support and highly recommend that you reach out to your schools and just let them know that you're there to answer any questions that they may have, to kind of escalate things to the DLT that we may be, that we need to know in order to set our own goals. And ask to be in on the town hall meetings that are happening, any SLT meetings that are happening, just as a support for them. Any questions about that? Okay, so Louis, can you put up on the screen the percentages of families that opted into?
Yep, hold on, give me 1 second.
Learning? So as you all have known, yesterday was the release of the parent surveys of by school of families who have opted into full remote learning. Now, I know that the mayor and chancellor said that overall as the city is a 25% of parents that have opted into fully remote. In District 25, it is a bit higher. But more importantly, as we were looking at the data, we saw that it's important for this DLT to know what this looks like by individual school, because there are some wide gaps between them. Yeah, Louis, you got to make that a little bit bigger.
Okay, then I can't use this.
Okay. So, as you can see, some of our larger schools, and one of the things that Louis organized for you, because we didn't get this data from Central, was that he listed he took all of the survey data where parents had selected remote, and separated from the parents that selected it from blended. Now,
Or that did not.
no, now not every school answered. So what he did was he took the overall enrollment. So this may be off by
Well,
between.
this is from ATS. This is pretty good.
Currently from ATS.
Live,
Okay.
yeah, live, yeah.
So so he took the total enrollment as of right now, and listed that as the no match column, and found the percentage. So in the survey, where you see here, reflected from the survey is the blended and remote column, and then the no match came from what he took from the total to give the percentages. Now, most of our schools are over 25%. There are only 2 that are at 25%. So you see PS 20, which is one of the largest schools in our district, as well as PS 21 in terms of elementary schools. They're at 43 and 41%. You can keep going. 24 is almost at 55%.
That's really high.
Yeah, the numbers we were very surprised by a lot of these numbers.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of thought 24 was going to be high based on what I've heard at President's Council.
Yeah, but this is really high.
Yeah.
After school.
So then you have one of our middle schools, IS 25 at 36%, PS 29 and PS 164, PSMS 164 are both the lowest in the district at 26.4, and I believe 164 is 22%. 193 is also low at 20.61%. That is actually our lowest.
Lowest, yeah.
But the rest are all above, above the 25% threshold, and actually above 30%. 242 is very high at 50%. 244 is at 49%. But those are our early childhood schools.
And semi.
99 is high at 50%. That's a K-8 school. I was surprised that our middle schools are lower than I thought. I thought they were going to be higher than I thought. So if you look, 379 is at 33%, 294 is at 28%, 250 at 33%. Where's 185?
237 is pretty high.
237 is at 45, but that's reflective of their school.
What is the no match means that they didn't answer the survey?
So
Didn't answer the survey, so right now
what
they're
I did
automatically
was
blended.
I downloaded a list of every single kid in the district. And
Okay.
then I matched it with the list that we got from the Learning Preference Survey. So on the Learning Preference Survey, parents were supposed to only fill it out when they chose remote, but some filled it out anyway and chose blended. So if a child was matched, I brought over their choice. If a child was not matched, that means that they did not complete the survey. Now we are assuming that these kids are going to be blended because that's the default. So if you look, the blended plus the no match plus the remote equals the 1102 for the total.
So the no match, we're assuming is going to be blended.
The survey.
Yeah.
Right. The no match is a default for blended, but we can't assume that it's going to be blended, because one of the things that we've been saying is
Right.
that Remember, you can go remote full remote at any time. So if anything,
Right.
these numbers are going to increase.
Well, yeah, the remote number would increase.
Right.
But
The
for
remote.
programming purposes, the principal would say, okay, I have to program, 625 kids for in-person learning right now.
Gotcha. Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Because I didn't complete the survey because you said it was automatically default to
Yeah,
blended.
so you would be under no survey for 379. You're one of the 272.
Right.
People.
Christine, right. But Christine, also you said that you yourself have been talking to a lot of people that may not have filled out the survey because they're deciding whether or not they want to go remote or blended. So right now we have our principals planning with the blended and no survey result numbers.
Right.
And then if there's a large number of kids that do not come to school and choose to go full remote, that's okay. The only thing that might do would be to reduce class sizes. But one of the things that we're asking is a lot of our schools were at model 2 or 3. So we went back and asked those schools that were in that place to now, with these numbers, to see if they can fit into model 1, A or B, because in those models, students come into school more. So for example, where PS20 was at model 2, they now have a little less
Can
than.
you just refresh my memory? Which is model 1 and 2? I'm so confused.
Models 2, up on the screen, models 2 and 3 had those 3 groups of students, A, B, and C. And because there was 3 groups of students, kids came into school less often. Now that we know that large number of kids are going to be remote only, we have a smaller number of students to plan for in-person learning. And then schools are able to shift to model 1, which only has 2 groups of students, A and B, and will be able to come to school more often. That's what they mean.
Okay, thank you. That's why I was confused which was which. Thank you.
Yep.
Sorry.
Right. So most of our schools were model 1A and B anyway. There was a small group of them, some of them being our larger schools, where they were at model 2 or 3. So we've now asked them to go back and look, taken into account the number of, is this me?
No, I got it.
Taken into account the number of students that are going fully remote, and asking them if they can get into model 1. And there were some today that changed. So for example, PS 79 changed, 184 changed their model to 1A, PS 242 changed their model. So that's where.
So we should actually have almost no schools with 3 groups of kids.
Unless there's a reason for it, yes.
Right. But for the most part, I think a lot of them are moving to model 1.
Yes.
One of these options.
Most of them are.
Christina, it doesn't really affect your school because Renee had already chosen 1B from the beginning.
So, but here's the difference. If you see,
Yeah.
there's a 3, in alternating weeks, one of the groups comes to school 3 times a week, the other comes 2. But if you go to model 2, it gets a little, everybody's coming 2 times a week.
Some come in.
And some comes.
Right. See, we were trying to have more of a consistent, our SLT was trying to be more consistent. So for the working parents, that we could say, okay, your kid is going to be in school Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and your kid.
So that's model 1B.
Right. Yeah. I think that's what we chose. I think that was the structure, Renee. Yeah.
Actually, they're both consistent if you think about it. Model 1A, Group A is Tuesday, Thursday. Group B is Wednesday, Friday, and they alternate Monday.
Right.
Group, and model, and model 1B is Tuesday, Wednesday for Group A, Thursday, Friday. Way it's a rotating Monday, so you would still have.
And I think in your case too, Christine, I think Renee also connected with the local elementary schools as well.
She did. She connected with 129 and 29 so that we could coordinate with them, which was really smart, and I'm sure a lot of the parents appreciated that.
And actually, all of our College Point schools are the same model, which is really good.
Yeah.
Right.
See, that's because College Point is the best. We rock.
And we'll try as much as possible to try to align the groups with the requests in College Point.
Danielle, I sat in a town hall meeting last night for 183. And there were some parents that still hadn't decided what they wanted to do. I know the deadline was Friday to decide if they were going to be in blended or in remote. So
Right.
some parents were waiting to go to these town hall meetings from the schools to decide. So now, if
Laura, that's okay, because remember, if they did not take the survey, then currently they are in blended. If you took the survey and selected fully remote, you cannot go back into blended. So if they didn't take the survey, they are in blended, and you can go remote at any time. And
The
the reason
Dewey
being is
website was updated yesterday.
the only thing that would happen is if a large number of parents decided to go fully remote, is it would reduce the class sizes across the schools for in-school learning of the blended model, the in-school
And it might
portion.
actually shift, the whole class could actually shift to remote if that happens.
Right. What I was saying yesterday is it's easier to collapse a class than it is to create one. So we're not worried about that. We'll be able to accommodate any person that didn't fill out the survey that chooses to stay blended, because we're planning for that.
Got it.
And the learning preference survey is still open, and they changed the language on the Dewey website, and it talks about the timeline. So August 7th was the deadline. During this window is when families could flip-flop back and forth, remote in person. Now at this time, everyone who chose remote is now frozen remote, and going forward, they can continue to go into remote learning only. But once you do that, you can't go back.
Okay.
Until that predetermined time in the end of the fall or winter.
Right. I see Janine just put in the chat that she just went into the survey, and you can opt into full remote.
Yeah, the survey's open, and the principal's list is updated every night with new kids. Right.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
I'll put this in the chat too.
Yeah, so we should probably let the parents know, I'm just speaking out loud, that if they wanna switch from blended, or if they didn't answer their survey and they want to go 100% remote, now's the time to, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Tomorrow, Dr. Mike and I have a principals meeting. We're going to be addressing things such as this. Now, remember, all of our schools, except for PS 130, have had official town hall meetings. PS 130 has had parent meetings per se, but not an official town hall meeting. Their meeting is tomorrow, the 12th. But most of our principals, which was in alignment with the governor, so I'm glad that we are doing this, is that most of our principals are having weekly meetings with their families starting now, and they are also in the process of planning staff meetings. So I see Lamar has come on. So Lamar and I have been working really well together, just in terms of the sharing of information and collaboration, and encouraging collaboration between school principals and chapter leaders. But Lamar has also allowed for us to release postings for principals to be able to do outreach to teachers who are off right now, to do planning meetings. And I'm going to speak to you a little bit about one of the ways that we're going to support those planning meetings, but also full staff meetings before school starts, and before teachers are asked to report. So principals can get feedback from staff members as well during the planning process. Because remember, town hall meetings are everybody, and teachers really do understand that although everyone is welcome to be at a town hall meeting, it is really information for families. So Dr. Mike and I are also talking about organizing meetings for principals to meet with their staff to really discuss this work as well. And Lamar has been really good at encouraging attendance in that too, even though our teachers are off this summer.
I just wanted to make one point or comment. Can I, Danielle?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think a lot of parents that are opting to send their kids to the blended program believe that if the numbers are really low, that their kids will go to school more than 2 or 3 days a week. But that's not true, correct? It'll just affect class size, and they will continue on either model A or B. right?
Correct,
Um,
correct.
So
Yes.
parents are
Remember-
mistaken when they think that their kids may go 4 days a week or 5 days a week
Right,
if the numbers
right.
are really low.
Right,
It will.
because remember, Joe, one of the things that we have been talking about is our strategic work with the SLT and schools just around the PASS survey and the social distancing. The number one thing we have to make sure in terms of opening schools is safety. We have to do it safely where we are allowing for appropriate social distancing, because if everybody gets sick, we have to go fully remote anyway. Those 5 days a week were never a model that was presented to the community. It was always these 3 models. What we have done as a district is we've spoken to many of our principals, because we do know, just from my work with the community, that parents are asking, if I choose a blended model, I want my children in school as many days as possible. So our conversations that we've been having with principals, and then when we present the model selection to a review team, so it's not just me that does the final approval, I'm doing it with a team of people. One of the things we have to ensure is that a principal just didn't go, so we did it both ways. So if a principal selected model 2, we looked at all the same data that we asked them to look at, and we said, okay, we do believe they should be at model 2, because in order to open safely, looking at all the square footage that we're looking at, we believe that that needs to be done. But if there was a school that we thought could go to model 1, we asked them to reconnect with their SLT and say, like, look, we see that you can do this. Why aren't you doing it? And what we did find was there were some school SLTs that were making decisions that they were not asked to make. So for example, they were saying, we don't want to use the auditorium as instructional space. Well, you don't get a choice to do that, because that's kind of like overstepping what we were asking schools to do. If the auditorium is a safe instructional space where you can maybe fit a little more than 10 or 11 kids in there and do instruction safely, and that's where we would go in and support. So some of those schools were then able to shift to 1A and B. Given the numbers that we're looking at, there are still some schools, for example, PS 185, and I have to speak to Ms. Mishar, the principal. You know, our middle schools, their numbers are not so high, and she's got 1,600 kids in her school. She may have to stay at model 2 in order to be safe, and we would encourage that, you know. But if you are a smaller school and now you have 45% of your kids fully remote, then we would want you to create a program that would allow those parents that chose blended learning to be in schools more than not. But the most would be 3. The most would be 3 days.
Got it.
Hi, Danielle. This is James Vasquez. Good
Hi,
to see you.
James. How
Good.
are you? Good to see
I'm
you.
okay, thank you. Listen, I know you obviously you got a lot of information here, and I appreciate you saying that. Can you talk a little bit about the issue of exemptions, because we have a lot of schools in District 25 that are large and are looking to possibly do some exemptions because of the issues of space. I could tell you that both Flushing campus as well as John Brown are possibly looking for some kind of exemptions. Can you explain that process a little bit?
Sure. So within all of these models, one of the recommendations of Central was just in terms of them being able to support districts and individual schools. They asked us, if at all possible, to consider the models that we've presented to you. If a school, after trying, could not run their school safely and efficiently in terms of teaching and learning, they did have the ability to ask for an exception. Those exceptions are sent to the teams that I was talking to you about. So my team is made up of my district team as well as borough support. And what we are asked to do is review those exceptions and either approve those exceptions or ask the school a couple of more questions or to revisit what that exception is. I'm not part of the committee for high school exceptions, so I can't speak to any of the examples of the exceptions that have been asked for, James, but I do know some of the exceptions that we were being asked to look at, we actually went back to the schools and asked for certain things, and I'll give you an example. So one of our schools asked to move days in model 2, right, Louis? Can you find it and put it up?
Yeah, you want to see 242?
I just want to see 242's exception.
Sure.
Now the exception is null and void because she's going to go to model 1A or B because she's got almost 60% of her kids staying home. But I'll tell you what we did ask. This is an example of the work that we've done.
You're keeping me on my toes today.
I am. And you always answer to the call. And next is Dr. Mike. Get ready, Dr. Mike.
Oh, Central didn't delete it yet from the website.
Always ready, always ready.
Yeah, I know. All right, Louis, you're not answering to the call now.
I wasn't ready to show this.
You need to be ready at all times.
Well, he's working
All
on
right.
that, Danielle. So
I
clearly,
found.
also my other issue is that there is a real question as to how, and obviously I don't speak for principals, but how can schools possibly plan if things are going to continuously change? Because you can continue to have more and more parents opt out. So that right now, as you pointed out, you have some schools that have 40%, 45% going remote, but as late as the day before Labor Day, we can end up having 80% going remote. Then how does a school plan that way? How do you program that way? How do you plan instructionally for those kind of things if we're continuously changing or could possibly continuously change?
So I listen, and I've said this. One of the things that I think is really important, and I'm glad this meeting is being recorded and public, is that we need to really give a huge shout out to our principals and all the work that they are doing this summer, because at this stage, given the information that they just got yesterday, many of our principals have reprogrammed about 3 times just as they're waiting for information to come to them. James, the best possible case, and once again, I will, I'm going to speak just from my K-8 experience. And Janine, maybe you want to come in if you think you want to add anything to what I'm saying. My best possible experience and what we've been saying is it's better to have smaller class sizes and to collapse classes and reutilize your teachers if they are in the building in a remote capacity within the schools than to have too many kids and not enough space to put them. So our principals, in using that model and in working within these models that the city has presented to us, they're able to do that. And so but I know high school is a completely different animal, and I'm recognizing that high school is a completely different animal. So I can't necessarily speak to that. But Janine, I know even though you have a smaller school, you've probably been part of the discussions. Do you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, one second. I just want to put my headphones on so I don't sound like I'm underwater.
Okay.
Do I sound like I'm underwater?
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
That's the Tara Merwick computer. She has the same computer as Tara Merwick.
Okay, is that better?
No, but we can still hear you.
You can hear me?
It sounds the same.
Give me one sec. Let me change the setting. Every time I go on a different
Yeah, you have to change
platform,
the-
I need a different kind of setting.
Yeah, but Janine, we can still hear
you, Janine.
Okay. So, it is a different animal. I mean, that's completely true. You've got so many kids with different credit needs. And then you've got the teachers, and teachers are teaching multiple preps. Some of them, even if we've got 25% of teachers asking for exemptions, but if those all cluster around the 9th grade, then our entire 9th grade doesn't have any licensed teacher to be with them. So that creates scheduling. I don't like to use the word impossible because we've kind of weathered the impossible and realized it isn't, but it's very, very challenging. And then, we're hearing the possibility of teachers either teaching remote or teaching in person, and that adds yet another difficulty to us because we just don't have the manpower. So while it's a little bit more, it's probably the easiest in elementary school because of common branches, it gets more difficult in 7th grade because of the license requirement. And then when it comes to the credit requirement for high school, it becomes really, really difficult. And because we're a 6 through 12, now we've got 2 groups of students whose needs need to be met. So yeah, it's not easy for high schools. I think they're really, really struggling and doing very creative things in the interest of their teachers and the interest of their students. But yeah, it certainly isn't easy.
Right. And I want to be clear is that what the city has asked us to do before we ask for an exception is to work within these models. But like Janine has said, we do know that schools are doing some creative work. And as they do that and they do present exceptions, there's nothing that says it won't be granted. We just ask to work within these first. So
and I appreciate that, but I think just to what Gina is pointing out is that this is when it becomes really much more difficult than in the high schools. And what I have found throughout the borough is that the high schools are finding it incredibly difficult to use these 3 models that the DOE has given the certification requirements, given the fact that you can only have, for example, a phys ed teacher doing phys ed classes, given the fact that you can have only people with certified areas doing these courses, and then trying to do this while not only is the ship sailing, but is also there is a big winds coming in there, and it's been a really, really difficult task. So I know that chapter leaders and staff members and committees have been meeting with the school leadership team, but every week or two things change. And so as things change, I just foresee this to be even a bigger problem, especially in the high schools, as we get closer to September. So my great concern is having these multiple plans, and then having perhaps more students opt into remote as we go on. And by the way, staff members can also apply for accommodations throughout the school year, so things can change, the medical conditions can change. So all of that can change as well. And I'm just saying that to me, that these plans that the DOE has put forward just makes it incredibly hard. And I know that there is this, we're coming up with information piecemeal, but it is August 11th. And you know as well as I do, by this point, schools should, especially in the high schools, should be programmed already. We should already know where everybody's going to be. But so much is still up in the air. It's just a real concern, us going forward in September, in the high schools at least. So.
Yep, noted. And I do know that you're absolutely right. What I do know is that, and I can just speak to my experience as, in the DOE, and you'll know this too, James. If anybody's going to do it, it's going to be New York. And, what we do know is that we have to reopen our schools in some capacity, and we need to make sure that our students are learning. I look at two different things. I look at, in my conversations with some high school principals, about kids that were about to drop out of school and are now flourishing in remote learning. It was just something they needed. And then I look at my own son, who basically said, if you make me stay remote for this year, I'm not graduating high school. So there are kids that have to come back to school. They need to be in in that type of learning. So I think it's one of the reasons why we've said in District 25, and just from, I'm only going to speak from my experience, our elementary, middle, and high schools, thrive and take pride in knowing our students well and knowing what they need. And I know that we're going to have to do that together in order to make this work. And I think you're right. We're not even in for a storm. It's like a hurricane, tornado, tsunami, all at the same time. But what I do.
Let's not talk about storms. I didn't have power for 5 days.
I know. Actually, this storm did not hit me hard. So it was funny. Everybody was worried about it, and I was like, whatever. I lived through Sandy, and I was okay. But I had a lot of people staying in my house. So, but I just wanted to show you, and I know this is a smaller scale than what James is talking about. So I want to thank James and Janine for giving us the high school perspective. It is completely different than from what I'm referring to. So, so I would also say that you guys can do outreach to Superintendent Lindsay to really ask her about what her exception process looks like at the high school level. And I will also let her know that this came up during the meeting.
Lindsay, Walsh, and Cintron, all of them.
Yes, that's true. Lindsay, Walsh, and Cintron. So I want to just actually show you what we did in terms of questioning an exception at the K-8 level. So if you see Model 2, 242 was asking to allow to keep the consistency of Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. But what they wanted to do was shift the weeks on Monday and Tuesday, where Group A would always come on Mondays and Group C would always come on Tuesdays, just for consistency at the early childhood level. Now, I was willing to present this to the committee because I did like the idea that parents would have, two groups of parents would have consistency, being A and B and C, knowing that their children would always, on week 1 and week 3, if you were A, be at school on Monday, and week 2 and 3, if you were B, be in school on, if you were C, be in school on Tuesday. However, the committee asked me to bring this back to them and say, you need to survey your parents and make sure a large majority of parents would not mind being in Group B, because that is inequitable. There would always be a group of students who would have to switch Mondays and Tuesdays between week 1 and 2. And that
Group B would have to come in 3 days a week versus Group A and C, which would only have 2 days a week and have to schedule for.
Right. So because exceptions are collaborative, although they started at the SLT level, the review group asked them to go back and survey their parents to make sure that this model was something that was approvable to them. Now, this is actually null and void now, since they received their survey results and they have so many kids staying home, they're moving to Model 1A. But that is the type of exceptions that we're seeing and that are welcomed. The only thing is, before we approve an exception, we need to make sure that if you're going to release a model that's going to impact or favor one group over another, that the community needs to be in agreement with it. Any questions?
That's how the exception process works.
Yeah. Okay. So, so moving on to the next piece. So now that we have this understanding somewhat of how to plan and how we are going to manage school opening, remember with the projected date of September 10th, waiting to hear from the mayor on next steps. I have shifted my focus and supports for principals on the next level, which is when we open, what will instruction look like? It is the number one question that comes from parents when I am presenting at any meetings. And it is the number one question that comes from teachers around how are we going to get the supports necessary to implement this new type of teaching and learning structure. So while our principals are engaged in programming, and where Dr. Mike and I have given them all of the most current tools and resources and information and data that they have to start this process, we are simultaneously moving towards each school developing their own beliefs and values of what blended learning and fully remote learning can look like, that aligns to District 25's rigorous expectations. So as I had said in the beginning, there has been money given to schools that is allowing for this training. And I want to thank Lamar for working with me to get these expedited postings out. Tomorrow is our first training for principals around considering blended learning models. They are establishing teams, planning teams, as well as their instructional leadership teams. There's money for both. And we are offering training on what type of instructional models they should be looking at in order to create these values and expectations. And then over the next few weeks, the planning team, which is made up of teachers and administrators, will start working on that and will communicate that to parents simultaneously as programs come out, which will be towards the end of August. So Dr. Mike, you can take over and he will talk to you a little bit about and show you just a small portion of the training that our principals and teachers are going to go through over the next couple of weeks.
Sure. Okay, everyone. So the context of what we're going to be talking about is really what is blended learning. We're going to talk about a few of the models that principals are going to be working through. in training that's going to be forthcoming for them. And today we're going to discuss 3 of them: rotation model, flipped classroom, and flex model. The flipped classroom is part of what the rotation model talks about. We're not going to go in depth. We're just going to give you guys a little bit of a preview as to what it is that our principals are going to be engaging in as they make decisions for the start of the school year and their teachers in their classrooms. So the slides that you're going to see, they were developed by the borough office. So big shout out to them. Shout out to them for the work that they're doing with our schools and for sharing them with us so that we can then share them with you. So key tenets of the plan. This is something that you guys have seen before. Learning platform. Schools can have an opportunity to go either with the iLearn New York City or Google Classroom to provide instruction for our students. The vast majority of our schools in District 25 will be using Google Classroom, at least as we heard
Can
it.
you make that bigger?
Yeah.
Let me just see.
No, I'll go into present mode. That's fine. Vast majority of our schools are likely to go into Google Classroom rather than the iLearn platform. At this point, many of our schools have grown comfortable with Google Classroom and are likely to stay with that platform moving forward. Data form decision making. This, as you know, is a big.
Dr. Mike, can I just something about that? So. Yep. I want to talk just about iLearn and Google Classroom. As you know, like Dr. Mike had said, many of our teachers had started with Google Classroom in March. iLearn was the platform that was used in summer school, and Dr. Mike and I spent a lot of time speaking to teachers, speaking to students in summer school, and just asking their opinions around both platforms. And what we did discover, which teachers have communicated to their principals, as because we are starting with these new expectations and values of what blended learning looks like, they really would prefer to stay with Google Classroom because it's what they know right now. Because they would rather focus on the instruction and the content than having to learn a whole new platform. So many of our principals will be communicating that to families within the next few weeks.
Yeah, and just moving forward with the other key tenets, the data form decision making part of this work certainly plays a vital role, and that includes the information Danielle was just talking about between iLearn and Google Classroom. It's a part of the data set. What do we know about where we were with our system that we've created, and how do we use that to support our learning moving forward? So knowing every student well is another part of this data-informed decision-making that's so essential. Our kids, our staff have gone through a variety of different things up until this point. By the time we get back into the buildings, we're talking about 7 months being away from children in a brick-and-mortar scenario. So it's been a long time. And knowing our kids is going to be at the paramount of importance in order to make sure that we're planning and providing them with the supports necessary to be successful at the start of the school year. So that includes screening tools that our buildings will have in play. Will include social emotional learning types of surveys. As many of you guys are aware, at the beginning of the remote learning process, our schools developed their own forms of gathering social emotional learning data on their kids. That data was used right away to make sure that any children that were having a difficult time, for whatever reason, were supported, either by the classroom teacher or building administrator or counselor. So we're going to continue working towards that end to make sure that our kids' needs are being met, both social emotional learning wise and instructionally. Shared and inclusive curriculum. Schools are going to obviously continue work towards embedding the work of their units of study into their classroom instruction with a focus on standards and key standards that are going to allow us to ensure that our kids are prepared, for their future. So a heavy look on the next generation learning standards will be taken into account as our teachers review those units to make sure that key standards are embedded an embedded part of learning moving into September and onward into the school year. And then the blended learning instructional models. Will support instruction to ensure continuity of learning. Is an emphasis on approaches that consider students' cultural, linguistic, and assets. So what is blended learning? So we start talking about it in 3 different ways. Face-to-face, as you guys know, small group instruction, whole group instruction, interventions, SEL, project-based types of learning. Online learning, providing opportunities through synchronous and asynchronous connections with children. And then blended, which is a combination of those two things, both in classroom and then online learning supports. So blended learning is a formal education program in which students learn, at least in part online and in part in classroom. Students gain greater control over time and pace of their learning. At least part of this work is supervised in brick and mortar, and other parts at home. Multiple pathways available for children to learn through their content and courses through both virtual and brick and mortar settings. What it is not, is simply putting a digital device in the hands of teachers and students. It's not scanning worksheets and uploading them for students to print and complete. It's not about sharing digital versions of class notes. It's not about experiencing a mastering of technology tools. It's not about thinking of students as being simply information consumers. So this is really about how do we create an environment for our children to still be successful and provide them with the means necessary to do that in both virtual and online, virtual and brick and mortar. So there are multiple models within blended learning. Rotation, flex, a la carte, and enriched. We're only going to be talking briefly about rotation model and flex model. A la carte model, as I was reviewing it, seems to be more of a high school model. But like anything else, any of these can be modified towards elementary and middle. And enriched virtual model also seems to be more along the lines of a high school model as well. So we'll be focused right now on station rotation, flipped, flex, a la carte, and enriched virtual. So rotation model allows students to rotate through stations on a fixed schedule, or at least one of the stations is online. This model is common in elementary schools. So right now, folks, in many of our schools, they engage kids in station types of learning, where there might be a teacher-led station. There'll be a station where kids are engaging in some type of collaborative activity, and there may be an online component as well. Doesn't always mean that there'll be an online component, and you'll see that with the flex. But this is something that's very common in our classrooms already. So you will see variations of the station type work across our elementary school classrooms, and certainly in some of our middle school classrooms as well. It's less evident in our middle schools, as it's more of an elementary school approach at this point, but that's certainly available for our middle school teachers also. Flipped classroom, it kind of takes the traditional relationship of teaching and turns it on its head, where much of the online work beforehand will be students reading articles, seeing certain teacher-guided activities, and they do much of that work on their own first at home, and then we'll be able to move that work into the brick and mortar where the teacher will have an opportunity to support them. So it takes the traditional I do, we do, you do approach and changes that more to a you do, we do, I do, where it's the students taking the center, working as a group, and then teacher following up with instructional supports towards the end. And this is very much a model that we've been pushing in the mathematics classroom, where kids are at the center of the work, where they're doing a lot of that grappling beforehand, working collaboratively with peers, and then teacher, based on the assessments that they've done, supporting children individually to support their needs. The flex model lets students move on fluid schedules among learning activities according to their needs. Online learning is the backbone of student learning in the flex model. Teachers provide students instruction on a flexible as-needed basis while students work through course curriculum and content. Just to give a little bit more context, at home, asynchronous instruction, students will view mini lesson, instructional videos, lesson materials. Students complete an exit ticket or an online quiz or assessment or online quiz to assess their knowledge of material. And then in classroom, students placed on computers to complete asynchronous activities while a teacher circulates between students in small groups or on computers. Small group instruction and independent practice take place simultaneously, and students move between activities and small groups while they're in class.
Now, I just want to say one thing about all of this. What we are showing to you today are research-based models.
Yes.
That does not mean we're going to follow them exactly. So I just want to be clear is that we are using these as a foundation for discussions and then asking schools to create their own values and beliefs about this. So for example, I might not fully, as a teacher, appreciate the way the flex model is structured as a flex model and may want to look to engage in a discussion around values about what we would rather see as a school. However, one of the things that Dr. Mike and I are going to work on with our school leaders and teachers is that we don't want schools to open and that everybody's doing something different. Because actually within the remote and blended models, we need consistency, right? We need consistency of learning. We need consistency of students' exposures to the standards, and we need a way to monitor and track what's happening. So this is a basic introduction of research-based teaching models for blended learning, but this is not where most of our schools will land.
So the resources that are available in terms of research-based, it comes from an organization called Blended Learning Universe. And on their site, they have a variety of different video tools and so on. So that, and we can certainly do this either next time, Danielle, or I can just share some of those links with everyone so that you can look at, what that might mean for us. Now, the only reason I didn't share the videos right now is that it does. We just need to get into the mindset. It does represent a classroom that's not going through this circumstance that we're going through right now, where social distancing is a real thing. So it does show kids that are in close proximity, and I didn't want to give the impression that is going to look exactly the way it will in our schools, given the new parameters that we're going to be working in. But the models themselves are very much research based from this organization that's kind of taken the language and organize it so that there is a common language amongst all of our schools that are going to be going in this blended learning platform. So that's kind of where we are right now.
Okay, any questions?
Anyone have any questions? Again, this was a brief intro. As we get closer towards September, we'll start giving you a little bit more of an in-depth look at what this is going to be, and certainly building leaders with their school leadership teams will be bringing you guys through this, as they start making those decisions for their own schools.
Can you share that PowerPoint with us?
Yeah, you can put the link in the chat. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Any idea of a time frame or a time where the discussion could start taking place in schools about the different learning models? And going from now until when school starts, any idea of when that window would be where people would be exposed to it?
So Lamar, some of our schools have already had the postings up for the planning teams. So they have already begun to start discussions. The other postings just went out on Monday. So the training for anyone who wants to participate in either the instructional leadership team or the planning team, and we've asked that they be merged for the purposes of training, that will start next week. And then following that, there will be time for the teams to get together and really make a decision about what within these research-based models they would like to see that will best meet the needs of their students and teachers, and however the program whatever the program is going to look like. And then the next meeting following that, within probably the next 2 weeks, will be a meeting with all staff members to kind of present it to them and get their feedback. And then following that, we're going to report that back to the borough office, and then they are going to create professional learning training sessions for teachers that will begin in September.
And I think the good news, Lamar, is that even amongst those models, you know, the experiences that teachers have in delivering instruction through stations is not something that's unfamiliar to them. I think that the biggest piece to this is really going to be around the organization of the instruction that they're going to be delivering, and not so much the models themselves, because they, as I said, they've done a lot of that work in their classrooms already. It's really, how do I now look at my unit and organize it within this approach to make it as successful as possible for kids? So I think sometimes it's the language will become, oh, I see, rotation model. Oh, that's the same thing as when I was doing,
Correct.
You know, my station teaching in the classroom. You know,
and
so
additionally, the important thing that we've been speaking to principals about is, what does planning time look like throughout the day? Because we do know that that's a necessity in terms of the blended model and remote. So there will be time carved out within the school day for teachers to meet together to sort of organize this work. So there you will see consistency across classrooms, because we want students to be able to recognize this when they're either in school or fully remote.
Yeah. So my concern, or what I'm thinking of, is I know what the sample schedule is presented, and keep in mind that it's a sample that the DOE presented, you know, for the day, for a sample workday. But even in that scenario, there really isn't much time carved out for that teacher or even that administration teacher area where we could sit down and even discuss or have these conversations on what it looks like. You know, it's 8 a.m., you're working with your group, and like you're on, more so than in the past, you're on all day. So it's, you know, the two 40-minute sessions, like 2 a month. I don't know if that's something that you can retain and grasp, you know, if you're kind of learning how to blend in your regular routines with the blended learning model. So I can see that being a question, a conversation piece, a concern. You know, it's like, well, we don't have that much time to really understand like what's expected, you know? I can see that being.
Can I just add to that, just to Lamar's point? And Lamar's a nice guy. I have a concern, because the concern here is that we weren't used to doing this before, and now us rushing to go get this done, where teachers weren't trained to do this before, even with, and I appreciate both Danielle and Lamar working on getting postings up for the district to be able to do some training. It's still small groups. It's not going to be entire staff members, and that's not going to happen until September. And the concern being is that we come back possibly on September 8th with classes starting on September 10th, to have 2 days of training of all of this stuff. It just seems like a really daunting task to get done in such a short amount of time for the entire staff, where people are not used to doing this, as Omar said, all day, doing these different models. It just doesn't seem to make sense to be doing it with such little time for training, when we could have been doing this for the last several weeks, if not before, or in June, when those conversations should have been happening. I just think it's unfortunate that, again, we're on August 11th, and we're talking about training literally tens of thousands of teachers to go into these programs, and with very little time to be able to do that.
Yeah, so agreed, and knowing that we are in unprecedented times, I think for the work that I'm expecting in the district is that we are, you know, I was glad to hear when the governor was talking about having meeting with individual teachers. I know that the vision of District 25 has been one of collaboration. We've been asking principals to meet with their chapter leaders to really talk about this and their staffs as a whole. But right now, I think this is the best plan that we have to keep moving forward in, an unprecedented situation. And I, my commitment is to both, making sure that teachers have this foundation. What is really important for me, James and Lamar, is that I don't want different schools to create things on their own that without being able to recognize where models are coming from, because that will allow me and the borough office to work with Central to get the best training possible for teachers, so we don't wind up where we were in March, right? But I do understand what you're saying, and just in terms of the work that we've done at our level, Dr. Mike and I have been planning and sort of waiting for opportunities to do this, and unfortunately, it's right now. So we're going to take what we got and move it on.
Yeah, and Danielle too, I think, while it was not necessarily connected to blended, teachers have had opportunities since March to really start engaging in what online virtual learning looks like. They've had experiences in a variety of different training opportunities from March through the end of June. And I think a lot of that learning will support them moving into the beginning of the year, including how to organize their instructional practices that it will support in September. Now, do I agree that we need a lot of time to continue to engage in professional learning? Absolutely. We always need that, whether we felt like we were good at something before or not. Training takes time.
But one of the things that we do know, right?
But
one of the things that we do know is that our teachers were extremely resilient and they rose to the occasion. Not to say they didn't need additional training, because they did. Yeah. Just fairness to them. But the classrooms that we visited, District 25, and Lamar can speak to this too. We had maybe 3 or 4 incidents of issues with synchronous learning, but otherwise our teachers were on. They were speaking to kids, and they wanted to do that because they knew what was in the best interest of kids. And I appreciate Lamar going on to President's Council and really saying, like, our teachers will do what they need to do, and I think they know what they need to do. However, this is and I hate to use this term, new normal of teaching and learning. I hate it, but it is. And we need to make sure that we're in front of it as quickly as possible. Like, I could be holding back a flood, but, at least I want to be able to say, we're ready to get the teachers the trainings that they need in order to, after they begin the school year. Look, I'm going to be realistic, but we're going to be in a place where we can get that for them.
Do we have
comment? Can I comment also? I mean, am I on? So,
Yeah.
I understand the frustrations, but what about the students also? I mean, have they been, have they really learned anything from March through June, right? Yeah. So I think we need to also consider the rights of the students.
I think so too. I mean, if I see your point, Joe, because at the end of the day, I always say, at the end of the day, our job is providing the service for those students, right? That's our job. But at some point, you can't put children first if you're going to put teachers last. And we have to be able to provide that service in a way where we're fully trained as much as possible and learning how to do it. What good is it to have something in place where I don't know how this works, or I have to factor in this new model that we're probably going to use, but even the model has flaws because we have to keep in mind social distancing. And even, so there's so many things that we have to factor in. And yeah, time is an issue, and there's nothing we can do about that at this point. But the concern is, how much more are we going to have to embrace? And I stand by it. At the end of the day, teachers are resilient, and we're going to figure a way to get this out. We're going to figure a way to get this out right, as right as we can. But I'm just wondering, and I'm just feeling like it's going to come across as it's something else that we just have to learn on the fly while the plane is still flying. And what good is that for the students that we're serving if we're not giving them the best education service possible, when we could have done it a different way and, probably find a way to prepare ourselves to give them something that they need. That's how I'm looking at it.
Right. So something that you said is actually an expectation that Mike and I were hoping that a teacher would say in terms of looking at these blended learning models and saying some of these don't work in terms of social distancing. And that is why we want to use these to start the conversation, and just an awareness of, like Mike said, we've done things like station teaching, like the reverse model. We've done that work. The question now is, what will that look like? How can we train you to support that in a blended model within our current program that we are now creating? And then, as Joe said, because one of the things that we have also learned across this time is training for students and making sure that they are where they need to be in understanding this model, because they too are very used to, I keep referring to my own son because he was a disaster during this time. But like, my son was used to going into school with a notebook and a pen. That's what he was used to doing. And he was learning, he was like, I'm going in and I'm just going to be this passive guy. I'll answer the questions when you ask me. I'll work in my group and I'll do that. There's a ton of learners out there like that. And now it's going to be very different. And it does take organization skills, which we now have to teach as well, which is why many of our principals have asked for, and I've already asked the borough office to put something together about like opening day routines for teachers to talk to kids about, like how do you engage in a blended model? Like what are some of the things that you have to establish for yourself that we're also going to give to parents? Because parents are asking me about school supplies. I'm like, school supplies? I'm like, let's talk about how we can put our kid, because that's what they know. That's their normal. At this time of year, they were at Staples looking for, because I know I was one of them, 59% crayons, 59-cent crayons and $1 markers. Like they're used to that. So I got a complaint where they were concerned that they were going to be asked to buy Lysol wipes. I'm like, nobody can get Lysol wipes. Don't worry about it. So, so this is going to be something new for all of us. But what I do appreciate is the willingness for everyone to work together. And I think the concerns and what we bump into will be raised to me, will be raised to the two of you. And then we're just going to have to commit to working together the same way we always have, just, answering different questions.
Okay, so as Lamar said, our teachers are resilient. As a city employee, I hate the word resilient, because every time that we're undersourced or underfunded, but our staff is so resilient. I don't think they realize how much pressure that puts on the person. So what about the social emotional state of our teachers? If they're stressed out and not right, how can they teach the students who are also stressed out? Because my child is not, he didn't do great in school or out of school. He's just, that's my child, whatever. But even he wants to get, my child's very antisocial, so I thought he would flourish in this environment. He is not flourishing. He actually wanted to go into the school, and he hates school. So you have him at home, but who's stuck on remote because I refuse to let him out my house because, I have an elderly mother and me with healthcare issues. He can't go. Simple. So like his teacher's stressed out because although she's resilient, she got a whole bunch of stuff on her neck. She has to learn a new system. She has to figure out, well, how do I do in-school instruction? How do I do remote instruction? And sometimes that may not come off as smoothly as they may think it does, because sometimes that pressure on her may be thrown onto the kids unwillingly. So what do we do in those situations?
So first, I want to defend Lamar. I said resilient. So if we're going to use the word as a leverage point, I will say I use resilient. So Charlene, I think you're bringing up conversations that all of us are having right now. I do know that social emotional learning, Dr. Mike and I have been working with principals all summer around this work. I mean, I've seen some of my strongest leaders break down because they want to do what's best for kids, but they still have to answer the same questions that we're talking about right now. You know what? The most difficult part of this is that we don't have any models to look at and look to for this. The worst place we had was Sandy, and that was only small pockets of schools, and they were able to kind of manage and lift from other schools that were up and running. So you're right. You know, I think we have to all work together as a community. You know, like another term that I hate using, but I'm going to say it, is it takes a village. You know what? So Charlene, as parent leaders, if you see that teachers are in that place, that's something you need to surface, right? Because if a teacher maybe hasn't checked in with their principal for a week or so, or a couple of days, and we see that happening, you know, what are the supports that are in there at school, you know, at the school? I will say that, you know, the things that we are pulling from is, you know, we have 5 years of social emotional learning under our belts. We have all of our principals trained in Ruler. Many of them work directly with Mark Brackett, as did I. We've had mindfulness training come to us from the central office. We worked not just around building social emotional supports in schools for students, but in the staff. When we first rolled this out, you would hear me say things like, we can't give social emotional supports to our students until we start with giving those same supports to teachers. So we're going to have to pull from the things that we know that may not have been applied to these situations, and start there. But what I am saying is there are no answers. I wish, you know, one of the most difficult things that I say to my principals is sometimes you're going to have to speak at community meetings like I am right now and say, like, I don't have a concrete answer because we didn't live through it yet. What I can say that we are well prepared in District 25 is the foundations of relationships that we have, right? So we have a really strong relationship with our CEC. We have a really strong relationship with our President's Council. We have a really strong relationship with UFT and CSA, to the place where we may not always agree, but we can engage in a conversation. And that's the best I can say for where we're starting. I think we're okay. You know, our principals have worked really hard and they're starting to do this work right now, but it's going to lead to a lot of questions, you know, and so here we are.
Yeah, and I think, Charlene, I think you're 100% right with the you know, the stresses and the social emotional learning supports for teachers. And frankly, I think that goes across every constituent that we have inside of the school system right now. In some way, shape, or form is going to have some kind of apprehension or anxiety over the way that the start of the school year is going to unfold. You know, in my home district where my kids go to school, you know, you hear it all the time from parents about, well, either they're nervous to send their kids back or they want to keep them home. And then you hear from a teacher that says, I can't wait to go back. And then you hear from another teacher saying, I'm so nervous to go in. You know, so it ranges from adult to adult. And I think you're right. I think, you know, as we move forward, it's about how do we keep our finger on the pulse of not only the needs of our kids, obviously through social emotional learning, but the adults that are in our buildings, and opportunities for our families at home should they need some of those supports too. Because I think everyone's in their own way is going to need us to be there for them. So, you know, it's going to be tough, but we always say that, you know, in District 25 we are going to get through it in the best possible way that we can, and then we'll be successful at it too. So, lots to think about moving forward, and I know it's going to be hard, you know, for us in terms of that SEL piece and making sure that everyone's aware. But we're going to be out there. We're going to be making opportunities available for kids and adults to communicate with us. So, yeah, that's just what I have on my mind.
Any other questions? All right, so we're starting that tomorrow. Tomorrow that's starting, and I will be updating you on the next DLT as to where we are, but I'm sure I will be speaking to each one of you individually throughout the process. I know that we've gone on a long time with this, and I know that Dr. Werner asked if she can do her presentation, because I'm sure she's busy doing exactly what we were talking about. So, so Janine, you are next.
Great, thank you. Do I sound any better?
No.
No.
Not at all. Sorry.
Echo canceling speakers. How's that? Any better?
No.
No.
But we can hear you. Fine.
Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to unplug. Probably not any better, but I'm more comfortable.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll be brief. So a few things that Superintendent Lindsay wanted to share. One, schools are in the process of inputting their remote model selections, as we know. The data for family choice is out. And the DRT, her team is meeting this week and Monday to review selections for approval. And approvals are ongoing, and as James had mentioned, you know, that there are a lot of exceptions that are being requested. So I know they're going to have their work cut out for them. In terms of budgets, all schools have received their budgets. The cuts were not as severe as anticipated. They're not great, but they weren't as severe as we thought. So we've got a little bit of good news, for lack of a better term. CEPs, schools completed the CEPs, and we're in the process of revising them based on feedback. Summer graduations will be planned by each school and follow the same procedure as June. Summer school is wrapping up for high school students this week, and then you know, decisions about graduation will be made based on student progress. Townsend Harris, I know that there's been some questions concerning the Queens College program. So the response that the DOE is working with schools to seek alternative means of funding and continuing the program.
Janine, what did you say about that? I didn't hear that.
Queens College, the program with Townsend Harris and Queens College that was kind of on the chopping block. The DOE is working with the schools to seek alternative means for continuing the program, including funding funds from the school budget and renegotiating with Queens College. A meeting has been arranged and details will be forthcoming. And just one more thing that so far 4 out of 6 high schools in D25 have submitted their model selections.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's it.
All right. You know, once we get, Janine, if you could ask Superintendent Lindsay, if once those models are approved, if you could send them to us, because I did want to send the DLT a list of all the model selections of schools in the district.
Sure, I'll make a note of it now.
All right.
And we can see them in the tool too also.
Danielle, can you also include Walsh and Citron schools with that list as well?
Yeah, they're in the tool, like, yeah, we could get them.
All right, guys, I'm going to sign off because I have a programming meeting that seems like every day I'm at another programming meeting.
Right.
So
Okay.
they're ad hoc, so I have to stay around. But I'm sorry to leave everybody, but it was nice to see and hear you.
You too, Janine. Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. All right, last but not least, Gus, our illustrious Sedil. Welcome.
Okay. Prior to this meeting, I called Rosanna Napolitano just to make certain that what I'm going to say was legitimate. She indicated that as far as she knows, the template for the DCP is not going to change. And going forward, what we're going to do is use the same template. It has not come out yet. I know that you have been very good. You've got goals and you've got various actions related to those goals already in place. My commitment is as soon as I get a template, I will take your new material and your old material and I will put them together in the document in collaboration with the district teams, and we will have a draft document going forward. So that's about all I know about the DCEP at this point. Obviously, some of the content of it will have to be adjusted depending on what happens going forward with blended learning, remote learning, COVID, the status of the schools, et cetera, et cetera. So that's basically the DCEP piece as I know it. The old DCEP, the one that was completed, has not been posted yet. I'm told that iPlan will be functional at some point, and it will be posted in the usual way in iPlan. CEPs. Um, I was thrilled to hear that District 25, if I heard you correctly, you've already reviewed the CEP goals and the alignment. If that's the case, you know they're due, superintendent certifications are due on Friday. The second question I asked Rosanna Politano is what's going on with the goals report that we usually get for superintendents. She said it's not available yet and they're working on it. They're hoping to get it by, this week some point. So what I was going to say was that you would have to do it in the old-fashioned way by going into each plan and, reviewing the goals and doing the certification. And it sounds like you've already done that, which would indicate that you are, your reputation is in fact intact, because my Queens districts are always number one, number two, number three in the city, with the superintendents completing that task. So it sounds to me like you're on track as you have been in the past. Now, going forward with the CEPs, I'm told that come September, the I-Plan will have a component that will enable schools to put in action plans. This is an update year for schools in good standing. So they've done their goals, they've done their alignment. The next piece, it's my understanding, will be that action plans will need to be done by all good standing schools in relation to those goals. Obviously, those action plans will also be impacted by COVID, blended learning, the opening of schools, et cetera, et cetera. And we don't have a mechanism in I-Plan yet for those action plans to be put in. It's my understanding that good standing schools will not be doing a full uploading or editing a full CEP document. I get a lot of questions from principals on that, and this is what I'm telling them. So if you can get the word out, that would be helpful. Although I continue to remember, I emphasize this every time I get a chance to talk to you. I'm the CEP and I-Plan guy for all of your schools, for all of Queens North, and I get a lot of questions from Queens South too. So anything that happens with I-Plan or CEPs, your people should contact me. I always keep the district and the superintendent informed, in most cases as needed, as to what's going on. DLT members, you have a system where you have liaisons to specific schools. So if you run into any issues, you let me know about it, and I will do my best to run after whoever I have to run after to get them resolved. One item that I discussed with Mike directly, I gave him a call. What I do is I call Mike and Danielle at all hours whenever anything comes up, is the Title I issue. There's been some activity in Central in terms of PAC representation. That's Parent Advisory Council representation vis-a-vis these school opening plans and blended learning and town halls, etc. I've assured Sharon Rencher and my people that all of my districts have been on top of PACs. Every school has a PAC, and that PAC representation is engaged in whatever planning is taking place. So just keep track, because I suspect this is not the case citywide. And so, if we're asked, we should be able to have some kind of documentation or response to show that this is indeed taking place. I was going to mention to Janine's gone, but at the high school level, hopefully at the high school level, the same scenario is prevailing as well in terms of PAC involvement and engagement and representation. The wider picture is, I just want to remind you all, I'm the Title I and I'm the state and federal compliance guy. Issues that come up and related to anything related to the state, let me know, and in collaboration with the superintendent, I will get a hold of Sharon Rencher or whatever entity I'm supposed to get a hold of, and we will run after any issues that come up in terms of federal and state compliance. I don't know what, the state will require going forward for next year, but whatever it is, that's part of my bailiwick. The other issue that I just want to highlight, and please convey this to the schools, is I know that the circumstances are unprecedented, but they should still hold SLT meetings remotely or in place or however they're going to do it. So going forward, SLT representation in terms of school plans still have to take place. And we still have to keep some record of who's participating and what happened with the schools that are in improvement status is the state allowed us to provide what they called electronic signatures of SLT member participation. What that meant in a practical way is that the principal, there was a form, they indicated the kind of engagement that's taking place on the form, and that they listed the dates that meetings have taken place. And what they did was they typed in the name of the SLT member in a specific column, which according to the template that in the agreement with the state is that constituted the individual's electronic signature. Now, going forward for good standing schools, I don't know what the structure will be. That's the structure that I said was in place recently for improvement schools. Even with the improvement schools, I strongly suggested to all of them that I interacted with that if they're able to collect any signatures in whatever way possible from their people, they should do so using the old form and, scan it, file it away, etc. Going forward, after this crisis is over, and like all crises, they will be over, then I fully expect the state will probably retroactively want some kind of documentation as to what took place during at the school level during these unprecedented times. So whatever records our individual schools can hold and put together during this time, definitely they should hold meetings, and they should be reaching out to their parents and particularly their SLT members in terms of implementing their school plans and their instructional programs and school improvement going forward. I don't think I've left out anything that I was on my agenda. Any questions or comments on anything that I said?
So Gus, before I kind of open up the floor to see if Christine wants to make a comment on that, the one thing that I would like for you to kind of push forward to Sharon and Roseanne is that I know that there was, this push for the reintroduction of PACs, and Christine has graciously offered to take on the ownership and responsibility of supporting PACs. And I'm going to speak for the DLT and for myself as the district superintendent in that we support parent advocacy and parent leadership in the running of these PACs. But unfortunately, there has been a lack of training for districts who used to have they did not have PACs, and they had, these committees that were part of their PTAs, and it is causing some animosity between parents, because now you have a leader in Christine who's kind of asking for things, and people are getting upset, and she certainly does have a role that she needs to inform communities and groups and parents. And when we went to Face asked her to ask Esther. So Face is not aware of it. And your office may need to be made aware of it, but our PAC representatives that sit on DLTs and just need a little bit support of that information that is going to you should also be going to them. I know that Christine said that there is one next week, right, Christine, or this week? But
there's one Thursday. There's one Thursday, which
to just really reiterate that, because it is for District 25 an introduction of a strong parent leadership role, and Christine's having a hard time communicating exactly what that role is because it's new, and she doesn't want to step on toes of other parent leaders in the schools. Does that make sense?
Yeah, here's my question, just so I understand what the issue is. So there's this relatively new PAC framework, and we have a representative. So there is a disconnect in some cases between the PAC representation and the non-PAC representation. Is that the issue?
No, just in terms of Christine being the PAC leader on the DLT, she's running the PACs in the district as a parent, right?
And she's representing
has had
the various PACs,
training, and as she's trying to seek guidance, because we as a system come out and we say, oh, and PACs need to be made aware, right? So now Christine tries to get a handle on this and get as much information as she can, but we don't have anything to give to her. So I would say, can there be a consistent person, albeit from your office or Face, that does monthly trainings for DLT PAC reps? Because we're all supposed to have one now,
Or even just a go-to person, Gus, because I went to Face and I asked Face, and Face said, oh, sure, I'll send it to somebody. And then I got a response from the president of PAC, who was just another parent leader, who really didn't give me any guidance. And it's just very difficult. So if I had a go-to person that a point person, I know, I have an issue, I go to Danielle, or I go to Joe, or, I need a person. I need a people.
Yeah, Christine, I mentioned that there was training taking place this week.
No training. There's a meeting. There's a meeting Thursday, which I just found out about yesterday.
Who's running the meeting?
CPAC.
CPAC is CPAC, is that a DOE entity?
Parent Advisory Committee.
Okay.
So it's CPAC, okay. Right? CPAC encompasses a lot of different things, including this leadership capacity. But my concern, Gus, is that, and this because you've worked and helped us with this, but we've had some schools where the parents have complained about the Title I 1% being directed at the school level and not by parents. So Christine's role is to really support those committees in that capacity, and the vision of what the PAC represents on DPAC, right, which she represents here, is that she's able to support parents in doing that. And there's no guidance for her, and because it's new and we've never had PACs before, some of the school parent leaders are questioning it, and I just want Christine to have the information that she needs to present it appropriately to the parent leaders, so the district and central doesn't have to get involved, and it could truly be a parent-led committee.
Yeah. Okay. If you would, if you feel it's appropriate, if you could shoot that in an email to me, And what I'll do is I will escalate it to Roseanne and Sharon as an issue that District 25 is surfacing, and it's probably a citywide issue.
Right.
You know, it's probably something that needs to be addressed citywide. I
Right.
was told that there was they were working on getting someone at Central to worry about parents and Title I, and I assume that meant PACS, but I don't know whether they've actually identified anyone or anyone is in place. So, I mean, it would be helpful for all of us, I think, if I could, you know, escalate that, and maybe we'll get something back that will say, oh, you know, we've identified so and so going forward for the next academic year. It'll be such and such a person. And in
Right.
the meantime, Christine, if you run into any issues that you need help with, you know, even though I'm definitely not the PAC person or the parent person or whatever, you let me know, and I will do my best to be of assistance.
Yep. And Gus, if you don't mind, I would like Christine to send the email, you know, as the DPAC rep.
That's fine.
So you can forward that, and then
Just make sure you copy the superintendent.
yeah. I mean, she could copy the whole DLT. I mean, Christina.
Okay.
That's fine.
Yeah, I think it would be good because you're making the request. Yeah, just from all of us. So we're all on the same page and knowing that it's a need in our district for support for
It's
parent
a
leadership.
DLT. It's a DLT request on a
Yep.
district request, and
Yep.
you know, they've asked me to highlight the whole PAC issue. So, you know, since they asked me to highlight it, they should expect to get some feedback on it, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm glad that we finally have somebody who's willing to take this on, you know, because it is a monumental job to be that parent leader and support all PACs. I mean, we have about 23 Title I schools, you know, and she needs that information, but I want her to be able to have it where the DLT would support her, you know, and President's Council leaders who are also, you know, PTAs understand her role in PAC and the type of information she's giving and what that means. Because if we can structure it that way, then it would truly be a parent-led work coming from the DLT, and that's really what I'm looking for.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have to say, folks. Any other questions or comments?
Nope. All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Gus. Any new business? Okay, there's just one last thing that I did want to address, and I know that a lot of you are going to be hearing about this through your schools, and that is the health and safety portion of our schools reopening. So I know that I had mentioned to you the school planning committees that will be meeting, and I had tied that into, you know, making norms and expectations and values around what blended learning will look like in terms of teaching and learning. But the planning committees will also be managing what health and safety looks like within the schools based on the guidelines that are coming to them from Central and Department of Health and the CDC. So I know that parents and some teachers have shown concern about testing. As you know, as of today at 11:56, there is no mandated testing in order to come into school, but there are sites that offer free testing should families and staff members want to get that testing, and the recommendation is that they get it done 7 days prior to starting schools. There have also been clear guidelines that I did go over at the CEC meeting around what will happen as cases are reported to schools, and how all cases are reported to the test and trace teams that are going to advise schools as to next steps. Now, remember, we're not medical professionals, but what we have worked very carefully with our schools and will continue to do is to make sure that things are reported as quickly as possible. Just yesterday, we had a report of somebody who had a temperature at one of our rec centers, and the person was already tested and it was negative, and we've already gotten that answer. But I did have firsthand opportunity to see the stream of communication and how things are to be reported. They go into EIC. There's an email that goes to Staying Healthy. Staying Healthy sends something to Test and Trace. And so those systems are in place. Additionally, we originally thought that everyone's temperature was going to be checked when they come into schools. We know that is not the case. There is a link for anybody entering a building, and Louis, we could put that up here, right? The link to that you have to report your health before you enter a building and you get the entry code. Yeah.
Sure.
I actually took one myself. You go in there, it asks you if you have COVID related symptoms. Have you taken your temperature today? And you kind of get an admissions ticket to get into schools. We're asking all of our staff members that are entering the building to take that before they enter the building. And we are also going to do random temperature checks of staff and students. And then just in terms of the opening committee, they're going to talk about how safely we can open, and communicate arrival, dismissal procedures. We have shown our schools models about making maps to showing kids where to gather to get in. Yesterday, I was on an email trail with principals. Some of them are painting their fences, which show 6 feet apart. Some of them are, are putting tape and going beyond the signage that they're getting from Central to make sure that social distancing is being practiced. There will be extensive training for staff and students around what that means. We are going to adhere to our guidelines around masks. And we do know that that is going to be an area of concern, but we will continue to communicate to staff and families that if you choose to enter your child into the blended learning model, it is with the understanding that mask wearing will happen in schools. And speaking as part of the planning committee and then in conversations with parents about exactly what mask breaks will look like, how we can adhere to them. We've been having mask wearing since the beginning of July in our rec centers. Our PS24 rec center has about 60 to 70 students a day, and we've only had one issue with mask wearing. So I think for the most part, families that are choosing to send their kids to the blended learning environment do have that understanding, and we've made recommendations about practicing mask wearing protocols now. It is not easy to have this summer freedom and now to be asked to wear a mask every day. So we said, as your child is watching TV or maybe on the computer or kind of sitting in their room cleaning or doing whatever, that you might ask them to wear their mask to practice coming back to school. But all these health protocols will be made public to the schools and the communities, and there will be training in place for both staff and students. Any questions?
Danielle, can I just tell you that the U of T is very concerned about the safety protocols that are or are not in place so far with the DOE, including the rolling testing regimen in every school community, including the test results to be back in 24 hours, because we can't wait for the test results to be done. It's taking so long, in some cases right now, 2 weeks. A dedicated group of contact tracers to investigate who else have been exposed when they get exposed. We're also asking, and we've been wanting, a school nurse in every school building as well, which is incredibly important. And also the procedures in safety procedures in all of the schools, including testing and upgrading of ventilation systems and all of the PPE supplies that are needed. I can tell you, we have, as you know, we have a lot of buildings that have a lot of rooms and offices in work areas that don't have clear ventilation. We have newer buildings that have HVAC systems that may not be able to have that the recommended filtration system by the state guidelines in terms of making sure they can minimize the spread of the virus. We're concerned about what this might look like in some of these school buildings, And you mentioned the fact that in the summer you've had this wonderful success of very few, if any, incidents. I think you said one incident about the mask wearing. That is very different for 70 students who are going to a rec center than it is for an entire school system being out with all of the kids going in to do instruction, full instruction and teaching, and doing all of those things. And we know that even with the state guidelines of every student being 6 feet apart from each other in a classroom, all facing the same direction, including the teacher, it is going to be a very different world. And I don't know how that is going to, we don't know how that's going to, what that's going to look like, but I can tell you, we do have a petition out there to try to make sure that all the safety protocols are in place. And as of today, we don't believe that they are yet in place. So hopefully, as you said, all of these things are coming in the coming days and weeks. But I'm just letting you know the UFT has real serious concerns about the safety protocols in the DOE so far.
Yep. So just to answer some of those things, I agree with you. You know, a rec center is not the same thing as everyone coming back to school. But in the district, we did use as a model to see, just to test a few things. We have some of our youngest learners there because those are, you know, unfortunately, the students that our essential workers need to have in schools. So we did test mask wearing and just, you know, speaking with students about how comfortable or uncomfortable they were around that work, around wearing them. And additionally, not that I'm glad that someone was sick, but I will tell you that this process that we just went through in test and trace, we did have results back within 24 hours, actually within less than 24 hours. And the person that had the testing did go to one of the DOE recommended sites. So that's not to say if there's a lot of people that need to go for testing, we might not get that same result, but we did have that in the this particular case. So what I did see, albeit hearing your concerns, is there is that process in place because I watched the stream of communication happen. But, you know, like you said, nothing is perfect. I will also say that Joe DiBenedetto and myself have met with Hugh Didana, as well as the rest of the CEC, to really talk about specific schools that we do have concerns with ventilation, and we've asked him to report back to us to ensure that everything has been approved. And I will share those schools with Lamar also, so he can, you know, communicate that to UFT. And then, you know, once planning committees have put together the ways that each individual school is going to implement the guidelines that are coming out to them, Lamar and I will have a structure and a system for District 25 where if there are any incidents or concerns that come, we will be, you know, back and forth in communication with each other around that. And so that's where we are today in terms of that work. And we will update you as we get closer to the start of school and our planning committees start releasing actually what their health and safety guidelines will look like at each individual school level.
Danielle, I know we spoke with Hugh Didana about the possibility of bringing plexiglass into the classrooms. I was waiting to hear a response on that. And I know a lot of parents are concerned or asking, you know, they understand the concerns of the teachers, of course, but why is it that the testing is not mandatory, right? So if teachers decide that they don't want to be tested, you know, where are the students protected in that regard, right? And the testing, you know, some people, I understand you can get a test result within 24 hours. So should they mandate where the testing takes place, because other places offer a 2-week turnaround time? So those are things to consider as well.
Yep, and that is a parent question that I think has been heard loud and clear, both at the D25 level and at the central level. I'm sure that many of you have heard that in parent meetings, and so that will be something that I will wait to hear the response, you know, just in terms of what that would look like. What I do know is, like, in terms of HIPAA right now, there is not a mandate for testing or a specific place to go and get it. And I think that's what James is talking about, just in terms of concerns about testing and the release of results. So we will continue to surface that at our meetings, as I'm sure you will, Joe, and as will the UFT.
Question. How can a parent request a mandate for teachers to test? You can't request a mandate for students to test. So either way, they both should be mandated, in my opinion, but I know that's not going to happen. Who cares if the teachers are mandated to test and say they all come back and they're good to go? What about those students who are running around and haven't been tested?
I agree.
Where's the concern for the teachers and everyone else in the school?
Yeah, I think it goes both ways. I think that many of the parents are saying they, like you said, Charlene, they want everyone tested.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which is,
a lot of jobs are making it that everybody has to test before they can go back to work. Like, a lot of businesses.
Private sector.
Yeah.
I think it's not just about testing once. I think it becomes a question of how routinely you do that. You can go get tested today. You can be cleared today, and then tomorrow you can become in contact with someone that so it becomes a question of that as well, that I think is important too.
Yep. Yeah. All right. I want to thank everyone for being on here today. Does anyone have any other questions? I'm really, really honored and proud. We do have such a smart DLT, and I'm glad that we can have these open discussions. And what I saw today is what I've seen always, but now more than ever, is that each voice is important and each voice is heard, and I know that we'll continue to do that and just be a model for other DLTs and a support for our schools in the opening, the safest and most effective opening that we can. So our next meeting, I know we set, is September 14th. If at any time we need to meet before then, I will send something out there to all of you for your feedback. Please know that my office is here to support you with any questions that you have along the way. Christine, you'll remember to send that email to Gus.
I'll remember when you remind me again.
Good. And so that's it for today. So I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
And all right, so we'll do Christine motion and Lamar second. Is that okay, Charlene, or do you want to be the second?
It's okay.
Okay.
I don't want to step on your toes, Charlene.
To the punch.
No, you're welcome to do it anytime you want.
No, yeah, and honestly, I want to thank you guys. I'm glad we had this meeting the day before my principal's meeting. It really is going to give me a different perspective in how Mike and I direct the conversations that we have, and I think
we have SLT tomorrow too. I have an SLT meeting tomorrow too.
Yep. I think in the most difficult of circumstances, I wouldn't want anybody else here to kind of go through this work. So I want to say thank you to all of you, and stay safe, stay healthy, and try to enjoy the rest of the summer that we have.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Stay safe, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.